And it is another great one on black belts and boardrooms. Amir, I was actually watching Top Gun a couple of days ago, and as a kid, I always wanted to be Maverick. And the funny thing is, we have someone who is like Maverick on Top Gun. We have somebody on the show today like that. So I'm excited who we're about to announce on the show today. Amir, who do we have today?
Renard. I am just as excited as you are. And our guest today is Mr. Ryan Roberts. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Amir. Thanks, Renard. Appreciate it. Great to be here.
Yeah. So Ryan, we jokingly talked about Top Gun, but I know you definitely have that background as a fighter pilot. Tell us a little bit about, as much as you want to go into, your experience as a pilot and how that ties into the work that you do today.
Yeah, sure. Well, I wasn't in the Navy. I was in the Air Force. So, first distinction, although I did enjoy um, at one point in my career getting to ride along in the backseat of number 7 that they put in for 4 during the Blue Angel show because I took a jet to an air show and got to ride along. So that was my very short opportunity to ride along in a Navy aircraft. But yeah, sure. Yeah, my career as a fighter pilot started, a couple decades ago. Right, it was the culmination of a childhood dream. Grew up around airplanes, flew airplanes young, flew crop dusters when I was in college. Wanted to be a fighter pilot and had some significant obstacles to get there, but pulled that off. And that led to, several years, an opportunity to serve in the Air Force, where I was active duty for years with the Air National Guard. I had an opportunity to not only deploy in combat, but also to lead organizations and later end up in strategy and plans. And that whole journey led me through opportunities to lead some organizations and lead some teams at some large defense contractors. And that led to an opportunity to start my own company and my own defense contracting. And we specialized in risk analysis, specifically in air to ground weapons and guided systems. And that led to kind of this crossroads of departing from the Air Force, running my own defense company. Um, I did that a little bit different and uniquely because I had intersecting goals that met at the same time because I had set a goal many years before that to move on to a sailboat and travel the world a bit before my daughter was at an age to leave and go to university. So on her 12th birthday, I bought that sailboat and we moved aboard. So in my final years at headquarters US CENTCOM, I was aboard and also growing my company. And then I spent 5 years aboard, traveling in the Caribbean and growing my defense company. And then that led to where I'm at now, which is, I exited that space, but I learned a lot from those experiences, not the least of which was risk and vulnerability analysis in systems, which led to most of the work I do now.
I have to curiously ask this question now, Ryan. Living on a boat, I mean, you're living the dream that most people have. Yeah.
What's interesting is I think I have some interesting perspective about that because a lot of people say that. And if there's going to be a very small number of people that you'll talk to who can relate to this, but it's not as glorious as it might look in pictures. It is all of the ups. I mean, beautiful sunrises, sunsets, traveling. Beautiful scenery. It's exciting. Meeting incredible people, but there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, keeping a boat running, checking weather windows, knowing your systems. There's just a lot to know and understand. And those who know me well know that I tell this story from time to time because there was a lot of lessons that I learned while living on a boat and running a company at the same time and raising a daughter. Um, but that's a comment I would get a lot, right? You can imagine we're at some remote island somewhere in the Caribbean, and we maybe take the dinghy ashore and we landed on a beach, and somebody inevitably sees you and comes up and says something like, "Is that your boat?" "Oh, that's incredible. I would love to do that." And I would always have the same answer, and I'd say, "It's really easy. Just sell everything you own and buy a boat." And the point is, like, you have to be willing to make those sacrifices, and I'm not claiming that it is, worth it. It was worth it to me, but, that's not different than a lot of decisions we make in life. You know, potentially a nice visit to the islands and, spending some time on a beach gives you the same things, but it wasn't without a lot of sacrifice, but certainly those 5 years taught me, lessons in a very compressed time period, and I think my daughter could say the same thing, that she learned a lot.
That's amazing. So you've said some words that is now making me think, you talk about risk and running a company that handled risk, talking about making a calculated risk with a boat and then taking that journey. And then as a fighter pilot, being able to understand the word that or the acronym that comes to my mind is OODA, you know,
Yeah, sure.
um, the OODA loop. What is it? Orient, obtain,
Observe,
orient,
orient,
observe. Right.
decide, act. Yeah.
Act, right. So, on that topic, how does, all these experiences tie into your way of thinking about the world, and especially this changing world that we're in that's just so being complicated by AI? And not to jump right into AI, but it feels like there's a connection there that you might have a unique insight to share.
Well, to the first, I think that's a great question. I certainly have my own opinions, about systems thinking in a way that, even in our lives, just like business, and how we can do better to architect things. And it's the same thing with, risk analysis. When I talk about living on a boat, and doing the things I want in the face of like having to run a company too, and all the other things, that requires architecture, right? It's not some just a dream, and it's not just a vision board. In the same way that in organizations, it's not just a vision statement, and it's not just some, vague, unstructured meetings. It's architecture. It's very clear, and you spend some time with it, so you lay a real foundation. So, yeah, I feel like I was really fortunate that along the way, I was always maybe a out of the box thinker only because my path to the jet had some obstacles. I had, a particular health issue that, you know, potentially, should have, kept me out of the cockpit. And so I had to, like, figure out contingencies and how to make this work. And that mindset, I think, led to this, like, okay, maybe there's more than just accepting what we think is the architecture, what we think is the accepted. And so it became a natural progression, I think, for me when later I ended up running programs in risk analysis and understanding how you measure vulnerability and risk in a system. And, like, for me, that's when it clicked. I was like, "Wait a second, like, systems are systems, and it's your life or it's your business. It's the same thing, and there are known failures." And so, for me, living on a boat and running a business, I was like, "All right, well, here's how things can go wrong, so how do I reverse engineer this so that, I can handle the things I need to do to run the company, but also safely run the boat at the same time?" Now, what's interesting is that was not that many years ago. I can assure you that if we'd have had the AI tools, just a handful of years ago when I was on a boat, I mean, only in my last year on the boat was Starlink even an option. So I
Mm.
was on a boat when I thought the coolest tech we had was sat phones, and, like, when Starlink came out, suddenly I'm connected. So imagine, like, what AI could have done for me, like, when I'm trying to balance all of these things and I have tasks and projects to get done. So no question that I think that AI allows us to leverage things, in a way that it takes off, uh, it frees up decision room, right? Where it can do tasks for us that it was not available for me on the boat, and I certainly wish it was, 'cause, that was the real key to the architecture was just understanding, like, what are the priorities? What's gonna either keep what's the failure on the boat, which means what's going to be not safe, and we can't get to where we want to go, and what's the failures in business? Where can that go wrong? And in my mind, that's the best way to handle those situations, to start with the failures and kind of reverse engineer.
So architecture and failures. Now, paint a concrete picture for us. How should we think about AI and failure modes and architecture?
Well, so the good news is that systems are systems, right? Businesses fail the exact same way that mechanical systems do, right? They're predictable through documented mechanisms, and it's not random. So there's lots of ways to leverage AI. Certainly, I leverage it more and more since it allows me to do analysis faster, more depth than I could across several domains. Like in business, I specifically look at the architecture of a business across at least 8 domains in the business. And then I map that to known failures, right? And so I can onboard data from a company. I can onboard via questions too from leadership. And so I can now leverage AI to go, look, I've got a framework and now map it to where the known failures are. But even day to day, I think there's opportunities now when we look at the architecture in a business of we already know some of the most like critical failures businesses go through and right at the top of the list. And I think we all are, first of all, clear that most businesses don't make it, right? We know that more than half of businesses don't make it 5 years. So what that means is we have to look at then what causes the failures, and there's several that stand out. And leadership capacity is right up there, where founders get overwhelmed, they don't build a great leadership team, and then there's these cascading effects that happen. And one of the easiest and low hanging fruit, I think, in AI and what AI allows us to do these days is at least free up some cognitive space for leadership and especially for founders who have all this stress. And I think too many of them don't understand, like, really and truly, your prefrontal cortex only has so much juice. You can only squeeze it so much, right? We know that the average human makes about 30,000 decisions a day. And so you get decision fatigue. AI, even at level one, is what I would call it, right? Just routine tasks, things that are low value but at repetitive. Just freeing up that alone, like massive recovery index, increase for leadership capacity. And so I think that leaders these days, I think the friction comes with, like with any new technology, there's this feeling like I don't have time to learn it. And I think it's just the opposite. I don't think you can afford not to learn it. And we had a saying a lot, especially when you were working with young new lieutenants in the jet who, maybe felt like they were in a hurry because, like when you're providing close air support, people are screaming on the radio and people's lives are, potentially in danger. And so it is a hurry, but you make a mistake and things are going to take longer. And so we would use like a terminology of like, slow down to speed up. And I think that's what I would encourage leaders right now to do. If they're feeling overwhelmed with AI, it's like, I assure you, let's measure this in 3 months versus measuring it in, this week. So let's slow down a little bit and then you can speed up, because if they can take these things off their plate, at least personally, across the admin level of the company, automate, understand the tools that are at the very least available to them, not to mention advanced systems and agents. I think it's worth them understanding that that's the foundation of this architecture is leadership and the foundation team. And we have great tools available to free up cognitive ability.
Very good, very good. I wanna say first, before I even ask a question, I wanna at least say thank you for your service. I always mean that because I come from a military family, so when I do say it, I mean it. I understand that. I went through Air Force ROTC myself, so I still use a lot from what I learned from that as well, so definitely thank you for your service. And, the question I have, I wanna go a little in depth. You're a serial entrepreneur. You started at what made you make that decision after getting out of the military to say, "Hey, I wanna start opening my own businesses, create my own businesses? Because you could have done anything besides that. What made you decide, hey, I want to create an infrastructure and job opportunities for other people?
I, I think when I was younger, I didn't know what I know now about psychometrics. I've spent the last several years knowing, or at least spending time with behavioral science and understanding psychometrics far deeper than I would have known back then. But what I know now is that young me, by the time I was even in my 30s, was entrepreneur curious. My dad was an entrepreneur. He ran his own business, so it seemed natural to me. When I look back at my young military career, I think that's why when I look at my own psychometrics now, and I understand why I felt some friction, why my high dominance score is put can push back against authority. What that really was the entrepreneur and me wanting to kind of go and do it on my own. So that started young with me looking around, and I always had side gigs. I always had something else going on, but I had already launched the business that eventually would be the defense business. I launched that before I even left the military, about 3.5 years prior, because I knew it was a space I wanted to get into. I knew it was, I moved, specifically to kind of chase that down in Washington D.C. And took a position up there. So I think I look back now and I can say it was the natural progression. Back then, I just would have said, I just feel this pull towards, what I would say, and I've written about that I knew then that I didn't want to accept what others would say is the accepted path, right? Like, I don't know what the percentage is, but I have to assume it's about 80% of the guys I flew jets with are all at the airlines now. A fantastic career. I mean, it's a great career. I mean, people respect airline pilots. They have a lot of responsibility. It's an incredible job, and it certainly pays well. I knew it young that I did not want to pursue that path. I loved flying airplanes. I started flying airplanes when I was 17 years old. So it had nothing to do with that. It was the idea that I think beyond my military service, the idea of being part of a large organization and working for somebody wasn't just just wasn't for me. So there was always that, I think, just the independent nature of wanting to, be in the captain of my own ship, as they might say.
Understand. No, that makes sense. I think somewhere I thought about it, but I've never jumped in order to become a entrepreneur. I know Amir has kind of talked to me on the side sometimes about starting my own. I haven't got there yet, but it might be something in the future for me. But I do see, a- and honestly, everybody in the sense, every Fortune 500 company, it was an entrepreneur who started it in their basement or wherever. It had to start somewhere. Everyone who has these big businesses started or still entrepreneurs at the end of the day. So it does make sense. I want to gravitate over to, you know, we all know each other because of vertical motion. I will have to say this before I even go any further. Ryan, you might not know this, but you are definitely one of my mentors in the community. I learn a lot from you as well. But I just want the our listeners to understand, how did you get into vertical motion? You're an executive coach with time, etc. What made you want to gravitate to that area?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was, I think, a couple of years ago when I made the transition from business to, I sold the business and then uh, moved into more of a traditional consulting roles, right? So, I was working with various business owners and looking for opportunities of where I could apply what I really enjoy. And part of that I learned was the coaching relationship versus just the strict consulting relationship. So there was a little bit of that, and there was also a bit of the curiousness. I think I've always been a curious person. I'm okay with like not knowing things, or I should say, I'm not okay with not knowing things. I'm always looking for it. I'm always looking for something I don't know. And this move towards the way executive coaches are working these days, and there's a and certainly the way that they're marketing and the way we find these people online and they run online businesses. It was all foreign to me. And so I knew that from an entrepreneur standpoint, I just was curious about, platforms for finding ways to consult or coach. And I happened to come across Tom's information, and I talked to Tom, and I mentioned the psychometrics a minute ago when I realized that Tom relied deeply on what I think, and we're pretty certain is the most robust psychometric report in executive coaching. That was probably the hook for me. I thought it was an incredible thing because I knew, or at least I believed, that it was really important that leaders understand their own personalities and then understand team personality. It's in our in the failures that I study, it's right at the top. Mismatched teams and founder teams break a lot of companies. And I think it was just the combination of all of that. And so I just took the opportunity to go, you know what? Let me talk to Tom. We talked, found a way that we could work together. And it's an awesome experience to not only be able to be an executive coach, but to work with just a huge community of incredible leaders. And I'll make another comment about the leaders that we see inside that community. And Renard, you touched on, maybe entrepreneurship is your path. The reality is, we need great leaders inside, corporate world, and so I don't necessarily think that I have a preference one way or the other. I don't try to sway anybody. If your personality is such that you would be a great leader for in entrepreneurship, and not everybody is, then that's fantastic. But the same goes for corporate. I think that our corporations are in desperate need of legitimate leadership. I see it all the time. I talk to the leaders and across lots of different industries, and there's some big gaps. And so we need people in both places. And all I'm saying is, don't go jumping ship just because I like entrepreneurship. It suits me, but organizations need people like you, Renard. So that's okay too. We need great leaders across all these spaces.
I appreciate that. I'm curious, like you say, you're talking to a lot of people who are already executives, et cetera. What do you feel that one major gap is for them that they are missing? Is it just empathy, or is it something more that they're missing that you see on a regular basis?
Well, I'm biased because I speak generally from a framework of architecture. So I always will go back to, I see it over and over again, that I see leaders who just don't understand the importance of architecting a business and understanding how businesses fail and putting systems in place so that doesn't happen. Against their just best efforts, as far as they can tell anyway, they remain reactive. They remain reactive every day, and we all see it. And even great leaders have to go through these periods of like, how do I pull myself out of being reactive all the time? And depending on where you're at in the pecking order in leadership, sometimes you don't have tools, great tools to pull yourself out of it. But ultimately, that's the issue, and that goes all the way to the top of an organization. When leaders just feel reactive, and that is strictly a lack of a system in place. And they haven't slowed down to speed up, right? They haven't taken the time to go look. Do I have the right team? Do I have the right people? Am I taking the opportunity? Am I offloading responsibility in a way that I should? Have I created the vision? Can everybody in my organization tell me what the vision is? Can everybody in my organization tell me exactly where I fall? What my contribution is to the vision? Um, and and I just think that too many leaders think that's platitudes, and it's not. It's fundamental. And businesses break all the time because there's this idea that being busy is how it's supposed to be. And being busy can be fine. I mean, if you're busy all day with very good tasks that need to get done and projects, that's one thing. But we all know that that's not really what happens. It's leadership gets pulled to this and gets pulled to that. And, we know enough in behavioral science to know that that's not only not high performance, but we also know that there's these cascading effects that we can map in failures. We can literally take a look at what we know the known failures are, and we know that, like, oh, the business ran out of money. Well, guess what? 82% of business failures cite cash flow. But was cash flow the reason that they went broke? No. It was like 5 domains ago, and it started with founder strain, right? And so then there's founder strain, and guess what happened next? There's decision delays. And then because there's a decision delay, now there's strategic drift. And because there's strategic drift, now there's execution gaps. And because there's execution gaps, now you missed revenue targets. And now you've got a cash crunch, right? That's what actually happened. And it all started because of founder strain that starts with some real fundamentals of, like, what are you doing in the organization? Where's your awareness? What's the architecture? And what have you offloaded so you're not?
Ryan, this is such a beautiful way that you've explained it. And so I come from a engineering background, so software engineering more specifically. And as an architect of software, we talk about volatilities in the domains. So when you connect systems together or you build a new application, parts of that application will be more volatile than others. And as an architect or a software architect, your job is to identify those volatilities. And you can do things like, or use patterns like encapsulation, high cohesion, low cohesion, high coupling, things like that. Like, you talk about those problems areas. Thinking about the way you're describing it, I'm seeing that there's a pattern here that we can all benefit from, which is, can you identify volatilities within your life, and how do you architect around those volatilities so that you can manage whether it's your business or your personal life? How would you advise people, because you've talked about business, but how would you advise people to think about their personal life and architecting their personal life?
Oh, I love this. This is great because I do think they're essentially the same. It's a system. In the exact same way you just described the system that is software engineering, it's the same principles. In our lives, we can do the same thing, right? And we use whatever word we want to use for success. I prefer the word and philosophy of fulfillment, right? At the end of the day, whatever that is for you to live a fulfilled life. Okay, so if we're going to say that is success, because it's not necessarily your version of success or Renard's version of success or a number value, then now it becomes what's going to keep me from that? So now you're just mapping the failures, right? In military terms, we would call this contingency planning. Like, what are all the things that could go wrong to keep me from this, and what's most likely to happen? And there's a lot of great tools. We already talked about psychometrics. You guys are also familiar with a tool called Ikigai about how to understand your life's purpose and understand yourself a little deeper. I think that there's some fundamental things that people can do to architect it, but it starts the exact same way as we alluded to with what we see often in first-time founders or in leadership that is struggling. And and everybody sees this sometimes when they sometimes jump into a new leadership role or position at a new company. And every company has their struggles. But what's the default? And the default is you end up falling into the architecture that already exists instead of fixing it to a new, and having a new architecture, right? And we see that in businesses all the time where it's I need process improvement, as opposed to going, who told you we needed that process? So why do I care about this process that's going to have a 10% improvement when maybe we haven't mapped this out? And I would say it's the same thing in our own lives. And it goes back to my comment about what I found for my own path was, are we certain that what we have inherited as a system is actually the system for us? And so I think it starts with foundations like that. What is the life you really want? And then, right. Same thing as in business. What's the outcome I want? What's the business I want to build? What's the life I want to build? What does it look like? And I start with that. Forget what you think the constraints are, right? I'm just telling you, it just starts fundamentally with, what do I want the outcome to be? And now all I have to do is map that to, then what's going to keep me from that? And now I've just mapped the vulnerabilities, and I map it backwards to go, okay, if these are all the ways that are going to keep me from doing that, well, now I've just structured a system engineering solution to my life, and I'm going to start today with little steps, just like you do in business. You don't do it all at once, but you're like, all right, if that's the case, then I'm going to avoid doing these things and I'm going to fix these things. And the good news is, just like in business, in our lives, it's just one day at a time. It's just one day at a time. What can I do today that is going to move the needle forward to the most critical? Right. I can map this to the most critical things. What can I do today to move the needle? And every day we just move the needle. So I would say that we can do the same things in our lives, but I think it's critically important that we ask that first question. Am I actually starting with the architecture that's best practice, or am I just starting with the one I inherit?
I like that framing. So I know you and I have talked about books as well in the past. You and I are probably voracious readers, is a fair way to put it. What's that one book in the last year that you read that says, wow, that changes my perspective on something, whatever that something is?
Wow, that's a good question. Um, if I say too many James Clear books, that'll be too easy because his are always worth rereads. Societies and its Discontents, I think, has been something recently that just um, I thought was illuminating from the idea of kind of zooming out a little bigger to philosophical questions. Which look, I know enough about psychometrics to know that that's where I tend to gravitate, is a little bit too strategic, and I get a little too philosophical. So my personal struggle is, the day to day tasks. That's probably why I like a little bit more of Atomic Habits, right? Like, let's get down to what do I actually have to do. So I would say something between books like that, where on one hand it's philosophical, and on the other hand you've got the instruction manual. And for me, I think it's the balance of books like that, of zooming out and then zooming into what do I have to do day to day. And of course, I think Atomic Habits. And my daughter, I actually had a coach for her while she was, homeschooled, but on the boat. But every morning she had a call, 15 minutes with a coach. And it was based off of Atomic Habits, where it would go through with her how she was architecting her day, essentially. So yeah, I'm a big fan of books like that that actually are more leaning towards, what can I do today to move the needle forward? And just one thing, right? I think Renard and I have talked about this before, but I have my own rituals that are similar to that. Um, like I still do things manually. Obviously, I lean on a lot of digital tools, but I still use a checklist of sorts of what my day is going to be like. Um, but an important part of that is at the very bottom of this is, and I haven't finished the day because I'll do this after we get off, but it always ends with one micro adjustment. What's one little thing that I could have changed the day to have done better? And then I put that at the top of the next day and just pick up tomorrow doing the same. So I would say in general that I notice more traction in my own life when I spend more time with books that give me, what's one tidbit? That's just one. I just need one takeaway that I can apply to my life today.
That's a good advice. At least you're making it actionable and not just reading it for the sake of reading a book or being entertained. You know?
Yeah, and I cheat when I say when I read a book. I only read or listen to a handful of books a year. But I lean on an app called Blinkist, and that's what I listen to on my long walks in the morning. If you're not familiar with the app, it's like it's Cliff Notes, for nonfiction. And so it just distills it down to, 15 to 20 minutes of the core message in the books. And I find that just incredible that I can get right to the point of something that's just like, man, I just wanted one good thing today that I could apply. And then if it's a really, really interesting topic, then I mark it, and I'll listen to the whole book. But that's how I prefer to operate, only because I think every day I do it in the morning because I'm just looking for one, like, what's something today? Like one thing I could just pick up today that I could apply, something different. So generally that's what, I make a long list of all the things I want to write about. And that's what helps kind of, get that going, is like I just need one little idea, something new that I hadn't heard before, or maybe articulated in a way that landed.
Blinkist. I have to add that now to my list. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. In fact, when I had my company, I made everybody download it. And then, like, generally weekly or every 2 weeks, I would push out blinks that I at least wanted the team to listen to. It's like, look, man, I'm not gonna, don't need you to read the whole book. Like 20 minutes. Now we can talk about an overview of something that I think are some good principles. And so I would have the various teams, download that app. So I've been using that app for a long.
I'll say this one last thing, and then maybe you have a perspective that you can share on it. But I'm reminded of Edgar Dale's cone of learning, if you're familiar with that.
The cone of learning.
Yeah. So at the very top of that cone is lecturing, which has the least amount of retention. And then at the bottom of that cone is teaching, which has the most amount of retention. Now, admittedly, I'll say I listen to audiobooks a lot. So I consider it to be, higher up in the cone of learning, which is probably not optimal. But my way of trying to get that knowledge to retain in my mind is to actually apply it, which is one step above the actual teaching part of it. So I like what you just now said, which is get your team to listen to I guess, a blink, which is now another new verb for me,
Right.
uh, and then put it into action. So anyhow, I'll leave it at that. But you reminded me of The Cone of Learning by Edgar Dale.
Yeah, no, I found that to be true in my life that, like, if I just listen to a book, but I don't take notes or don't write something down or kind of have an, pause. It used to be when when I lived in Washington D.C., I would read physical books because when you're on the metro, I need to burn half an hour, and I was a highlighter and note taker, in the margins, and I'm still that way now. Even like if I'll listen to a blink in the morning, I will either jot down a quick note on my phone or do it as soon as I get back. If it's something that I go, hey, I want to be able to apply this. For me, it usually turns into something I'm going to apply. I'm going to write something about it, like something short, and because it just helps it sink in, right? And it's, this cone of learning. If you just mentioned that if you can apply it a little bit in your own life, then it sticks a little more than just reading it and go, oh, that's really useful. For me, I find that I have to take some notes. Generally, if anything else, my notes are too long. That's my friction.
Well, my good friend Renard over here, he and I have debated about the value of a physical book versus a
Yeah.
digital book, and I know he's more in the former than the latter.
Yeah, yeah. I still like an old school book in my hand. Don't get me wrong. I'm trying to get more into audio books, but for me, I get more knowledge from reading than I do just from listening. It's weird, but I listen to music and can remember music. But as far as a book, I like to have it in my hand. I'm still old school. I still collect books. You can ask my wife. We got too many books, far as she's concerned, and I started picking up more reading because of her since she's a teacher. But I'm curious, Ryan, and we go back to this landscape of AI. How is AI helping you as an executive coach, but also as you being an entrepreneur and helping other startups? How do you see AI across the landscape as well?
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly relevant question. It's interesting to see how rapidly it's come upon us, right? And it's happening so fast that we've also moved past the phase of the ones that were pushing against it, right? With any new tech, there's always the naysayers, and it feels like we pushed through that a little quicker because so quickly, even in 2025, we saw just rapid advancements and better models for language models, and certainly much more use of agentic AI, much more automations inside businesses. So yeah, I think that leaders have got to be aware of the landscape for lots of different reasons. I talked about the one previous, which was that at the very least, what I call tier one tasks, which is that's where AI like really loves. It's just repeatable task, right? And it may not even be super complex, but at least get that off your plate. So I think leaders have to know, like, look, whatever it's going to take, and I would suggest an audit. Like, just audit your week, man. And there's lots of different techniques. Some of the best techniques are literally like take at least a day and have an alarm go off every 15 minutes. And literally at that, when it goes off, write down what you're doing. That's a great way to audit what you're actually doing during the day. And then going, now, which of these things can I now automate? And the answer for too many people is a lot of it, not the least of which is, I think, communications. You know, we live in a day and age where we have tools like AI, but we're far less productive than we think we are, and it's because of task interruption. You know, we know that it takes our brains over 15 minutes to switch tasks, yet it's all we do. Is like, oh, this goes off, and then this alert goes off, and I have a Slack message, and then I have an email, and then I'm back to doing this, and then somebody pings me and says that we want to have a meeting, and nobody is being efficient. And so I think there's ways to actually leverage AI in that space, which we go and look, you can turn all those things off. You can give automatic responses. There's all kinds of ways. Of course, it requires leadership to understand all of those things of how to best leverage the AI to give the human brain the break it needs to be creative. Right? We've talked about this before that AI is very, very good at complex tasks, and we should be leaning on it. And by complex, I mean think of the biggest math problem you can come up with. It's just complex. AI can do that all day long. Humans are complicated. Relationships, communication, nuances, visions. Those things are nuanced, and they're not complex. They're complicated. So we have to free up the space for this and lean on tools that can do all of this for us. And the more we can understand why are we saving room for this? Because because I have a prefrontal cortex and the machine doesn't. That's why. So I'm going to give it all of the routine tasks that live in the other part of my brain that I don't need all the repetitive task piece. I need to free up the creative space in my brain. So that's what we need to make sure organizations understand, that that's your value. Lean on all of these tools, understand it, do an audit for yourself, figure out how your company can run all the complex tasks and free up the room for thinking creatively, strategizing, the human connections, all the things that actually matter. Because at the end of the day, we are social animals. We are emotional animals. We make emotional decisions. We don't make logical decisions. So we need to free up the space it's going to take to be successful in those spaces and allow the machines to do the things that the machines can do.
True. So that ponders me into my next question. Where do you see our landscape, let's say in the next 5 to 10 years? You talk about the human side. Yes, we need the interaction. We need to still be able to talk to each other. But now AI is moving so fast. Do you feel like we may lose a bit of that human aspect, say in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, it's happening so quickly that from I would always defer to what's the failure, like what's going to happen if, what's the failure mode, and the mechanisms that's going to cause an issue, either humanity at large or at the very least inside a business, when it comes to AI. I certainly don't think I have the answers to know what I think it could be. I certainly think that there is a crossroad coming, with what we're already seeing in a generation, in the youngest generation, that doesn't communicate well, right? They just don't. And I'm not picking on, the Gen Zs out there, but they grew up in a different world. And while they have skills that my generation didn't, what they don't have is interpersonal skills. And that's still required, because we have to remember, like, if we distill this down to what's it going to take to lead a company, and we hold on to at least after millions of years of evolution, do we think that in 10 years suddenly that the emotional centers of our brain are going to disappear? No. So we're still going to be emotional animals, and we're still going to make emotional decisions, which means we're going to follow who? Those whom we have trust in. We know that that is the core thing required for leadership. You can distill it down to one thing. People follow who they trust. It's that simple. So are they going to trust the machine? And the answer is no, they aren't, because the brain as we understand it now emotionally is not going to have a connection with a machine. So therefore, we know that humans are going to still have to inspire and have trust. And so I think even as that gap narrows, we already know that younger generations have lost some skills when it comes to interpersonal skills. And I think, like anything else, frankly, it's laws of economics. It will fix itself. It will fix itself in the economics of what we see happen in the next couple generations. Um, I'm a fan of open markets and free markets for a reason, because corrections happen, and we will see what happens with AI. I think in the next 5 years, that it's reasonable that we can expect that, there is going to be a lot more machine learning in terms of emotion. I'm an advisor for an AI startup right now, and these type of AI systems do have the ability to understand emotion in conversation and lead that back into the decision loop. That is going to help inform, and ultimately, machines could be making some decisions, but somebody is still gonna have to lead, and somebody's gonna have to have an emotional connection and have conversations. I just think that, millions of years of evolution is gonna come up against a rapid change, and economics will decide, of who can lead in the future. And I think at least for the next 5 or 10 years, fundamentally, that doesn't change. That we should be very smart about what a machine can do. We can be efficient. We should be taking advantage of it, but it is definitely going to remain a differentiator, that the best leaders are going to understand how to leverage AI, but how to be a great leader and still instill trust in their people.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not gonna say any of our ages, but a lot of us started off in analog and then moved to digital. So a lot of that interaction happens. So we're so used to interacting as humans on our side. But you're right. It is different for the new generation. They are being born into technology, and the more these years pass, generations are just going to be more advanced for our technology, but that human aspect still needs to be around in order to have a conversation with someone. I've seen so many that they're great at technology, they know everything, but far as having a conversation, it's almost impossible because that just has not been they're not used to it, as for me, when I was a kid, you wanted to be around your friends, you all go outside and you have fun together, and then you come in at a certain point. Not everybody was on, Nintendo, whatever it is back then, so it is showing my age a little bit since I said Nintendo. But, yeah, I think it's something to look at. I hope that the human aspect is will still be a part no matter what we do. At the end of the day, you're right, Ryan, that a human is the person who is creating all these pieces of technology, AI, etc. So I do agree with that. So I'm looking forward to seeing what will happen in the next 5 or 10. I will have to ask you one last question. What is your favorite? Is it ChatGPT for you? Is it Claude? What are you using most of the time?
Yeah. So in terms of large language models, there's been a lot of changes in the last year. I mean, Claude's Opus update has been incredible. So I lean heavily on Claude for a lot of writing tools, but there's a lot of other tools out there. So for writing or for putting documents together, I think that's a great one. Perplexity is particularly good for deeper research. Um, when I'm doing any type of deeper research or putting papers together for research, I go there. um, ChatGPT, I use less and less. It's more of just conversational, personal, because I have some trained custom GPTs that I built in there still. But I would say on a day-to-day basis, I find myself using the latest Claude models and Perplexity. And of course, inside Perplexity, I can actually link it to Claude. So when it comes to those tools, yeah, that's what I've seen, at least for me, in the last 6 months of a shift away. And there's a lot of the space is going to change. We'll even see what Grok has in the future. I think that'll be interesting to watch, as I think we might be seeing. If you don't know, if you're watching that landscape, I believe that they're going to have more money available to deploy at that company than potentially other companies. I mean, these companies generally, like OpenAI, are far away, millions of dollars away from profit, as is Grok. But of course, Grok is about to merge with companies that are making millions of dollars, and I think that'll be an interesting leg up for that particular model. So I think in the future I'll be interested to see how that one evolves.
I'm kind of moving towards Claude more and more. Of course, I think everybody started off ChatGPT. It was the best thing at a certain point, but now these other large language models, AI, etc., are basically passing it up now for the most part. So I've been using Claude a lot more, but I'm doing the same thing you're doing, Ryan. I use ChatGPT for as conversation wise, getting some thoughts together, etc. But even Claude is starting to have more of my attention. But I know we're getting close to time. Of course, we ask everyone who's on our podcast, what is your theme music? What is the music that gets you ready for the day? So you can just be that great entrepreneur, that great executive coach. Ryan, what's your theme music?
I don't think I have just one that sticks out. I listen to a lot of music and I can get, kind of pumped up to a lot of different songs. Um, but it was about, I don't know when it was, sometime in the last month, that on my playlist came up a version of My Way that I hadn't heard in a long time. And it's Willie Nelson's version of that song.
Mm.
So if you've ever heard Willie Nelson sing My Way, personally, I grew up listening to that kind of music, Willie Nelson, Willie Whalen and the Boys. And, so, yeah, I would say, My Way, when I hear that song, I always, get a little pumped up. That's always kinda how I've felt about architecting my own life. Like, I remember hearing Willie sing it and think, like, there's a guy who, architected and mapped his own life, and to hear him sing that song, I thought it was incredible.
I love that. I love that. We've had so many people with some great theme songs. That is another one that I'm gonna have to go and listen to that one as well. So Ryan, I have to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. You have given us a master class. We appreciate it so much. And I will say to our Black Belts and Boardrooms listeners, we will see you on the next one.